Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Encore Network program, Cogenerating a Better Future. I'm Janine Vandenberg, Chair of the Leadership Council of the Encore Network. We're a member-driven and volunteer-run coalition of individuals and organizations who champion the civic, social, and economic contributions of people aged 50 and over by creating communities, stimulating learning, and inspiring action to transform the Encore stage of life. More than simply a membership organization, however, we're a network building a movement to create a world that is expressed in our vision, a global culture where older adults are vital contributors to more engaged and equitable societies. I think this is especially relevant today as we are in the midst of Older Americans Month, where too many older adults are still portrayed with negative stereotypes instead of as agents of our own and co-creators of a better community and society. So I'm personally finding today's program relevant for a lot of reasons. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm feeling a particular urgency after the events of the last month to co-generate this better future now. So I'm truly looking forward to this program and hearing from Mark and Eunice. With that, let me introduce my colleague, Jim McGinley, who will be facilitating today's session. Jim is today representing the Encore Network's program committee. He has a long history of working not only with Encore.org, but also with the Encore Network, where he's active with the Intergenerational Affinity Group. And many of you may know Jim as well from his other work with global nonprofits. With that, Jim, let me hand you the virtual microphone.
Thanks, Janine. This is a joint program with the Encore Network and the network's Intergenerational Affinity Group. We're pleased to welcome Encore.org leadership to share with us their new vision and how we can collaborate. The agenda in this fast-paced program will have Mark Friedman and Eunice Nichols provide an overview of their vision, and then we'll have time for questions and answers from all of you. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Clint Wilkins, the leader of our Intergenerational Affinity Group, will moderate this Q&A. And then we'll finish up with some announcements about what's coming from the Encore Network and from our affinity group. Mark and Eunice really don't need an introduction as they are well known to many of us. Personally, I've known Mark for some time with our mutual involvement over the years with Ashoka, which has a vision of everyone a change maker. Mark is an Ashoka Fellow. Among his many activities with his leadership role at Encore.org is his involvement with Ashoka's New Longevity Initiative, which has global impact. Eunice Nichols is Vice President of Innovation for Encore.org and has led a number of programs with them over the years. I've known Eunice for quite a while as well. In early 2021, we worked together on the Encore Network program called Connecting Across Generations. That was very successful and featured 3 Encore.org Innovation Fellows, including Shana Pittman-Frank, who is now on our affinity group steering group. So it's a pleasure to bring back Mark and Eunice and learn in advance what's next. Eunice, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. It is so good to see you. I'm just taking a little moment here to scroll through the faces, many of whom I've not seen in a long time. And it's a reminder how much you all feel like family to us. So thank you. Thank you for being here as we share a little bit about where Encore's been and where we're headed. I actually want to, Mark and I are going to do this as a little bit of a conversation between the two of us, and then we invite you to put things in the chat and we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. So we just want to keep this conversational and casual. But my first question for Mark that I'm going to tee up is because he is the founder of Encore and has been the visionary from the beginning. I actually often say I grew up in the Encore movement. Many of you know that. I've been kind of following Mark and his vision for now 20 years. But I recognize not everybody in the Encore Network has been part of that full trajectory, though some of you have. So I wanted to start by asking Mark to tell this history of Encore and how we've arrived at this particular co-generational moment. So over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Eunice. And I just want to echo what you were saying about feels like a homecoming, seeing everybody, and hope there'll be some chance to do it in 3 dimensions before long. And also to have this conversation at this point as we're really shaping how we're going to go out into the world and describing this new phase of work. And I feel like this co-generational idea, which we've been defining as bringing older and younger change makers together, to echo what Jim McGinley was just saying about Ashoka. We've adopted that change maker Ashoka phraseology to bring older and younger change makers together to solve problems, bridge divides, and co-create a better future. And Janine used the co-creation phrase. So I feel like this language is something that so many of us have been using and share. And it's something really that's been part of the organization since the get-go. Ostensibly what Encore has been about and is about in important ways is mobilizing older people to create a better world, and particularly to help younger generations thrive. But from the very beginning of the organization, this idea of older people doing that in collaboration with younger people has just kept presenting itself. When I started the organization, I was in my 30s at the time. But I started with John Gardner, who was in his 80s. There was a 5-decade age difference between the two of us. And I remember I always wanted to talk to John about the past, because he had been Lyndon Johnson's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, as the person who implemented Medicare and the Older Americans Act. And he would patiently answer my questions, but really he would always steer the conversation back to the future that he would never see in one way, but that he was so committed to. And then even so we were started with this co-generational model. John was our founding board member. He's the person who came up with the name for Experience Corps, our founding program. And then even in Experience Corps, which was centered on older people working in low-income elementary schools in their communities, from the beginning, we had young AmeriCorps members in the VISTA program who were working in Boston. Was one of the main, in fact, the young AmeriCorps VISTA in the Boston program was Mary O'Donnell, who's now running what used to be the Retirement Research Foundation, the RRF Foundation for Aging. And these bonds between the young change makers, these AmeriCorps VISTAs, and the Experience Corps members were a very powerful feature of the program. And then even in the Purpose Prize, we decided one year to do an intergenerational Purpose Prize, but it turned out to be a co-generational one. House Calls for the Homebound, and it was an older doctor, his middle-aged son, and his young grandson who had come together to create this program. So it's been an idea that just keeps coming through our work, and it was always something that got us excited, and we could see the way the complementary skills of the generations came together, but also these kind of deep emotional bonds. And now here we are in 2022, and I feel like the zeitgeist is shifting in this direction. I just had a chance to write an op-ed for the Boston Globe for the series that Doug Dixon also wrote a piece for, and it was an attempt to try to show, as Hacks enters its second season and Only Murders in the Building, has won all these awards, and TV show after TV show bringing older and younger people together to do things that neither could do on their own, or sweeping across the airwaves. Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga just won 3 Grammys. Movie after movie from the past year has had. And then the Pew Research Center just came out with a study that shows a 4-fold increase in multi-generational housing since 1971. 60 million Americans are living in multi-generational housing. So this isn't just something that's happening in the air, it's on the ground as well. Harvard Business Review just did a big idea series, and their big idea was age diversity in the workplace and how important it is. So I feel like from so many different spheres, this idea of the generations coming together in ways where it's not just mutually beneficial, but it helps to benefit the lives of all generations. And the timing of that could not be better because, as the new map of life from Stanford Center on Longevity shows in their recent report, we are now the most age-diverse society in history. Sasha Shen Jaffrey, who had been an Encore Public Voices Fellow, opened that report with these two magnificent charts. One shows the age distribution of American society in 1900 from birth to 70. And then in 2020, the 1900 chart, birth is the high water mark, and it's just a steady line downhill to 70 in terms of the numbers of people in the population. 2020, it's a flat line across the top. There's the same number of people who are 57 and 17 and 24 and 32 and 70, and that's just going to continue out. So I think all of these things, the demographics of society, this kind of shift in culture and behavior, and this experience from our own work have kind of come together and essentially delivered this message that it's time to work with younger people in ways that enhance everybody's lives. So that was a very long sentence. I probably went over my 6 minutes, but I did want to shift back to Eunice and ask Eunice if you could give a preview of how this is happening in our work already and will be in the coming years. So it's not just a shift in direction, but it's actually a shift in the work itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Excited to do that. Many of you here were on our journey of launching the Gen to Gen campaign to mobilize older adults on behalf of youth. And it was really, I think, during the time that we ran that campaign and partnered with you that we recognized that there were actually two things going on. One, that there, as you know, there's a growing, continues to be a growing group of older adults who have so much to give in the world, but we were finding an increasing appetite for those older adults to also work alongside young people to do the work. We've been kind of frequently saying that it's not just about what we do, how we do matters as well. And that's very consistent with Encore's vision over the years. So one of the major things that have happened over that time is everything that we learned from that Gen to Gen campaign and the values that we started to kind of be reminded of and to embrace, we started to just embed and integrate across the organization. So while that campaign no longer runs, I would say the elements of it are threaded throughout everything, organizationally and programmatically. The second thing I'll say is those of you who know Encore know that our two sweet spots are kind of in two categories. We kind of think of it as imagination and innovation, and that these are two sort of like a flywheel where opening up people's imagination to what is possible, helping them to shift paradigms of what they think needs to be the norm is super important. But when people start to think differently, if institutions and kind of ways of doing and being haven't shifted, then there isn't a way for that open imagination to actually actualize in the world. And so we also have this focus on innovation. So in this co-generational moment of Encore, we're focused on those two sweet spots, this flywheel of imagination and innovation. On the imagination front, you'll see, once again, threads of things we've always done, but really focused on this collaborative move. Some of you may have seen recently, about a year ago, we put out a collaborative series of essays in Stanford Social Innovation Review on meeting the multi-generational moment. I have two colleagues on the call right now, Steph and Marcy. They could probably put the link in the chat box if some of you missed it. We also have another colleague, Michelle Gahey, who is with us today and will be part of the intergenerational affinity group that the Encore Network has launched. So on the front of research, we've been like writing things in publications like SSIR just to open up people's imagination on all the different fields where co-generational, intergenerational work could have impact. We will be launching a major survey, a report on the major survey done by NORC out of the University of Chicago in June. I think it's the first survey of its kind. We really felt like, we've been saying co-generational action is important. And some of the pushback we've gotten is, yeah, but do older and youngers actually want to work together? Is that even something that people want to do? And so this report of, I think, 1,500 respondents across the country. We will be sharing what American adults think about working across generations to make the world a better place. I don't want to give away too many of the details in case Steph or Marcy get mad at me, but the results are supportive of the direction we're going in. But stay tuned, we'll be sharing more about that later. In addition to that, many of you have been part of or were tracking the Encore Public Voices Fellowship. We've been doubling down on investing in the Encore Fellows, the 3 cohorts that we had over 3 years, providing new opportunities. Right now, we have a partnership with On Being, led by Krista Tippett. Many of you have followed their work. Their work really focuses on social healing of all kinds. And we're doing a collaborative project right now to explore what does cogenerational social healing mean? What does it mean when you address trauma, generational trauma, when you address some of the biggest social justice issues of our time through a cogenerational lens? How might that actually support healing in a different way? And we've opened up an opportunity for our Public Voices Fellows and Innovation Fellows to submit creative works. It could be poetry, could be video, could be art. And then we'll work with On Being to turn that into a really exciting digital collection that will live on Being's website. So once again, these sort of creative partnerships with organizations that you perhaps haven't seen us partner with before that have a real footprint in this imagination space of thought leadership and narrative change is important. We'll be co-hosting an event with Greater Good Science Center called the Purpose Summit, and are just helping to advise on special speakers that can bring some of this cogenerational lens to the table. And I'll say one more interesting collaboration we are in is with Generation Citizen and Millennial Action Project. So this is an example of us wanting to collaborate, not just to out there have olders and youngers working together, but to challenge ourselves on what would it look like to collaborate with organizations that are themselves from an Encore perspective, cogenerational organizationally. So Generation Citizen works with mostly high school students, and Millennial Action Project is focused on helping millennials and Gen Zs get into policy and advocacy and supporting them in their lifelong journey. So the 3 of us are working together on a landscape assessment on cogenerational civic leadership pipelines. Who out there is doing work to develop civic leaders focused on young people, high schoolers, middle schoolers versus millennials and Gen Z versus older adults? And is there actually a huge difference in how we support people across that life stage spectrum? And what might we learn from each other if the organizations were talking to one another? So you can start to see this constellation of research, landscape assessments, narrative change, and of course, Encore will continue to write and think in these areas. On the innovation front, we have actually the wrap up of our Gen to Gen Innovation Fellows showcase coming up in June. It's June 29th. You will all get an invitation to that. I hope you'll come. It'll be a showcase where 15 very early stage, mostly early stage social entrepreneurs will be sharing the cogenerational work they've been doing for the year and cast a bigger vision on all the places where intergenerational collaboration can make a difference. But we're adding in an additional component where everybody who comes will have a chance to break into small groups and actually talk about what they're working on and ask very briefly for mutual aid and support from others in the room. We ask those who come to do that for the Innovation Fellows, but they're just 15 people. And so that's an indicator of our desire to continue to really support the larger field. We will always spotlight some people because that's great storytelling, but how do we then shift that energy into supporting the larger group of leaders and innovators that are out there? And then I think to be determined, we are discussing some big bets that will come in the future. We're still too early stage probably to divulge those, but hopefully like a major prize initiative. Many of you were here for the Purpose Prize, for the days when we were giving away $100,000 to social innovators over the age of 50. We're thinking at that scale. What might that look like for Cogenerate? We're not sure yet, but we have a lot of learnings on what was successful in the past. We are open to all ideas. If you're like, oh, Encore's big moonshot could be X. We've been tracking some of the exciting work happening out there on major prizes, major events, showcases. So we're figuring out our big play in that area. So open to more questions on that front as we go along, but I am going to pass it back to Mark for a second to share how this new body of work we're doing has brought us to an important stage in our organization's evolution and what that means for Encore going forward.
Thanks, Eunice. I just to step back to some of the things you were commenting on, I think what struck us so much is how, in the one hand, we've got this extraordinary demographic shift around becoming a much more multi-generational society and around age diversity, and yet how much age segregation has stood in the way of realizing the potential, and in many ways has contributed to some of the potential pitfalls. And so we're really very much working at that intersection, and it's been striking to me how this blight of age segregation even is prevalent in the area of service. I talked about Experience Corps as our founding project. It's where Eunice started working in her 20s, where I started working in my 30s. National service in America is highly age segregated. 94% of the AmeriCorps members are under 25, and 100% of what used to be the Senior Corps is now AmeriCorps seniors. The biggest federally funded service program, 100% are over 55. So, you've got these two major federally funded streams of service working in the same cities, in the same neighborhoods, oftentimes the same buildings, without the twains meeting. And, we saw what could happen when they did meet in our early Experience Corps experience. And so we've got, just to underscore, Eunice mentioned this, that we've got this project around national service, and we just put out a call for incentive grants for AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps seniors programs to work together across ages. And we got 20 applications for every slot. We're in the process of trying to select that. And so that I feels like there's a real appetite out there in that arena, and an opportunity for essentially systems change to kind of create more of an age integrated system of service in America. Eunice said she didn't want to give away too much from the survey, but I could tell from Steph's physical that it was okay to give away a little. So one of the things that came out of the survey, which I think is a challenge to all of us, is that there's deep interest in this cogenerational work on the part of young people, particularly young people of color. Twice, I think I may be getting this wrong, but twice the proportion of Gen Zers are interested in doing cogenerational social change work as we baby boomers. So I think it's both heartening and a challenge to those of us. I just turned 64 who want to do this work. There's a lot of energy coming from the younger end of the spectrum, but they, also the respondents of all ages pointed to age segregation as a huge issue standing in the way. People just don't know how to connect with people of other generations. It's not that easy in their daily lives. So anyway, this is all kind of a lot of context of how we got to this moment and how we're starting to act on it. We're going to change our name to Cogenerate in we were going to do it in June, but it turns out it takes a lot of work. So it's more like September. And what the essence of that is, we've been thinking that these new demographics, according to some people, it's going to lead to a new era of degeneration, conflict and chaos and shortages and zero-sum wrangling. We felt like it's actually the raw material for a regeneration. And we think that cogeneration, older and younger people coming together on equal footing, can be a powerful alternative to the degeneration scenarios and a route to a new era of regeneration. And the co part of that is really key. It's as much as I'd like to think of us older people as saving the day, we're not going to save the day on our own, but there is a great opportunity to build a movement of older people who want to work with younger generations on change, and younger people like Eunice and I both were, who want to work with older people in that way. So that's kind of the vision of this cogenerational movement for change. And I just see so many wonderful signs of that already, including Bill McKibben's magnificent work. I don't know if you saw his most recent initiative, which is seniors to seniors, older people registering high school seniors to vote. And we're gonna walk the talk. Eunice and I were very happy to tell you far in advance of when we announced this publicly, are going to become co-CEOs. I tried to actually to give Eunice the CEO job, but she, having observed my level of happiness trying to do it solo over the last 2 decades, was not raising her hand, but she did come back with a thoroughly co-generational offer of doing this together. And I was honored and moved and delighted, and we're gonna do that officially, but we're really doing it unofficially already. So so in that spirit, maybe I'll turn it back to you, Eunice, and just I've talked a lot about why I'm optimistic about this particular moment, but could you say a little bit about what has led you to this point, and about your enthusiasm for where this is all going?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that I really feel like I've grown up in this Encore field. It has deeply shaped me. And Mark and I do share the fact that we were both at some point young people that just loved being with older people. I grew up with my grandparents in my home. When I landed at Experience Corps in my early 20s, that felt like a homecoming. And then I've just been part of this group, represented by the faces that I see here. And, you know, I am only one person, but when I think about how my career and my life has been shaped by close proximity to older people who have both mentored me, but also co-worked with me, I can't imagine a different life. So I, like, from firsthand experience, I know what it would mean if we could dedicate a body of work to bringing older and younger together. And when I look at that survey that we're about to put out that says older and youngers want it, youngers want it even more than older. And I can verify that. I think I was desperately looking for older people to be with. But the institutional structures that segregate us are in the way. And so just I feel so passionate about that. This is one of the biggest contributions we could make, is to open up people's imagination that this is possible, and then to actually shift structures so that older and younger, you know, I don't know, if my dream would be in 10 years when we put out that survey, there's an increasing appetite for olders and youngers to be together, but at the same time, people will say, and it's eminently possible. It's easy. I see the path everywhere. That would be huge. And we're not going to do that alone. We would need to do that with all of you and with a lot of organizations also that have access to young people. Even in that Encore Network webinar that we did with Shayna and others, the reason we held that is a lot of people want to do this, but they don't know how to access the other generation. And so that's a body of work I hope we can do together. I'll say a word on the cogenerational leadership piece. When Mark and I started to talk about this, it's not just a strategic kind of like, oh, this would be nice when we rebrand as Cogenerate to also have cogenerational leadership. It really is, I think, a model that the social sector should look at more. I think there's a reason why there are fewer female CEOs than male CEOs. I think there's a reason why it's harder for women with children to lead. I think there's a reason why you don't see as much age diversity. And I think part of that is the solo lone leader at the top. And so this is part of Encore making a big statement that we think leadership should be shared, that it should be distributed, and that we should experiment with that. And so you'll see, in some ways, I'm excited to lead. I will probably never at some level take off my program hat. Programs are where my heart is. I love the field. I've been there on that side. And I think I'm as interested in seeing our leadership as a program of Encore in some ways, for Mark and I to dig into the learning, to be as transparent as we can. And I'm not that young anymore. I'm in my 40s. Mark is in his 60s. This is not about succession, though. I think this obviously creates stability. This is really about what does it mean to lead together, and whatever happens in the future, what would it look like for an organization called Cogenerate to have cogenerational leadership? What would it look like for our other programs that we run to have cogenerational leadership? And if you look under the hood, it's everywhere. You've seen probably increasingly that Encore only speaks at events, or we try to only speak at events where there are older and younger represented. And if they invite one of us and we are older or younger, we ask if we can invite somebody else of a different generation to come, because we know our one perspective isn't enough. So I think this is a great moment to be doing this. And it's a big experiment. We will learn and we will share. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to, I think, Jim, perhaps, to
Sure. Thank
moderate
you.
questions.
What a great way to get us started. And actually, Clint Wilkins is going to moderate the Q&As that come in from all of you. So please start putting your topics in the Q&A that you would like to see Mark and Eunice address. Clint, take it from here.
Okay. The chat box is open for your questions. So why don't you start writing?
Clint, I noticed a comment from Jay Bloom that perhaps one of you, Eunice, Mark, could react to about the role of the age-friendly movement and how you might think about leveraging that.
Yeah, I think that's, I've stepped into some age-friendly meetings, including in my own hometown of San Mateo. I had this thought like, wow, I should really figure out how to get involved in things that are right here close to home. And as you would expect, even though it's called age-friendly, when I stepped into their subcommittee meeting, it was mostly, I think maybe it was exclusively older adults. And so I think when we talked about the idea of cogeneration, they were so excited to have access to young people who could also think about this age-friendly idea. But once again, like the rest of the world, struggling with how to get young people excited and interested in participating in that. So I think there is a lot to learn and a lot to share with the age-friendly ecosystem.
Great.
Yeah, just to preview that survey a little bit more, and I'll stop at this point till it isn't completely old hat but we were really interested in this age-friendly spirit of, where do people want to come together? What are the issues that they want to work on jointly in a way that reflects the age-friendly ethos? And there was a lot of overlap. I think it was really encouraging, but there was also a real surprise, in the era of so much attention to social isolation and loneliness and its impact on people's mental health. A lot of it focused on older people. It turned out that young people were the ones who were most interested in working on mental health. And then in an era when, so many young people are focused on climate and the environment, turns out that was the top issue for older people, was climate and the environment. And but overall, it suggests that there are so many opportunities to come together in this kind of age-friendly way around a set of the most important issues of the day. So I'll stop with that and put it on mute before I continue coughing.
Okay. Here is a question. In the research and movements you're watching, what significant variations or commonalities did you see in rural-urban data?
Mark, you want to go first, or do you want me to on that one?
Why don't you start, Eunice?
Yeah, I think I'm not remembering actually right now if our research broke out by geography, but I'll let Steph or Marcy weigh in if they recall that at this moment. I will say we are working with some leaders and social innovators that work specifically on bridging urban and rural divides. And there is a lot of appetite in urban, I think we tend to know more about, about urban settings because many of us live and work in those areas and a lot of resourcing goes there. Rural communities, from what we've been hearing in conversation, are deeply interested in this because there are, because olders and youngers, actually, there are more older adults in rural areas that are more isolated and separated. And young people are trying to find more ways to get connected because there are fewer resources and structures. So I think that work is just as relevant there as in an urban setting. But as you would expect, there aren't as many resources for that. We've been trying to be intentional when we create our innovation fellowships and our public voices fellowships and things like that to make sure that we're including people that are working in rural areas so we can continue the learning there.
Here's a question from Jan Hively. Have you considered more of a global outreach for Cogenerate?
We have, and we've been drawing a lot of inspiration from things happening all around the world. Just to, I know Kathy Castrell is on the call, and from the Encore Teacher Program, and the Encore Teacher Program was the inspiration, or at least part of the inspiration, for Now Teach in the UK, which is mobilizing older people to teach math and science in low-income schools. And one of the things I've loved about that program, it was founded by Lucy Kellaway, who's a prominent columnist at the Financial Times. She's had a daughter who was in the British equivalent of Teach for America, and inspired her to do something for older people to get into teaching. Well, when she founded the organization, she hired or came together with a 25-year-old PhD in education, Katie Waldegrave, who's the CEO, and Lucy's one of the teachers. So it kind of, it just one example, it sort of flips that idea of the older, more prominent and famous person being the CEO and the young person being the teacher. And there are all kinds of examples from other cultures about how this can happen. And I would love it if there was an opportunity to create a much richer exchange about what we're learning here, what people are learning in other settings, as we try to put this idea on the map.
I have a request from those present to make your questions as succinct as possible. I'm going a little bit stir crazy trying to read some narratives and also filter things out. Jim, you may want to help me a little bit. A couple of folks are interested in learning a bit more about the decision to rebrand and just some of the specifics around it.
Yeah, I might start with a couple things. Like I said, since I have been part of the Encore movement for so long, is just this has reminded me of the moment when I was in the field running Experience Corps, and Encore and Civic Ventures at that time rebranded to Encore. And there was this expansion of what had, to me in the field, really felt like an organization focused on older adults, bringing their life experience as volunteers into the education system. Felt like this incredible expansion into work and purpose-driven work. And I had all kinds of questions on how that would impact the work that I had associated with Encore. And what I saw was Encore basically start to socialize the word Encore a lot, actually before they rebranded. And then to be able to hold both this new field that opened up a ton of opportunity around the workforce and purpose, which was so connected to the Experience Corps work, because we actually had older adults who were part of the workforce. We had older adults who wanted to become teachers and were Experience Corps members as a result. I ended up recruiting AmeriCorps Vistas, who were coordinators who were over 50, and on and on. And so I think I needed Encore to do what Encore does, expand my imagination, and then to create some innovation that would allow me to step into that. And found that we, like, both areas grew, both the workforce piece and the service and volunteerism piece. But it felt like a big deal at the time. It was a big deal. I feel like right now our Cogenerate moment is reminding me of that we've been so focused on purpose in the second half of life. This is not a casting aside of that. It's actually a both and. That actually, if we want older adults to have a fulfilling life, to give back, one of the most expedient ways to do that is to actually bring them into collaboration with young people and have those young people, like me, like Mark, like many of you, be influenced in a way where they will lead their second half of life differently. And there's so much more. We deeply believe there's more we can do if we do it together. And we all know the problems of the world are hugely challenging. And I'd say one issue is with our cogenerational direction is Encore only is embedded in the second half of life. It is a word designed for that. It doesn't have capacity as a word or a brand to be more than that. It's an important, hugely important, like we can't do the Cogenerate work without Encore, but we can't do the Cogenerate mission with that name. And so I want to recognize for some of you who are hearing about this, it may feel very unsettling. I have been there on the other side. And all I can say is a huge commitment that this name shift will expand the field and the work and the opportunities and the collaboration for everybody in this room. It will not limit the work. But I would also love to, we have Marcy and Steph on the call, two people that I think are beloved to many in this room, who are working deeply on the narrative and branding side of this. Anything you guys want to share?
Marcy,
You go first.
Okay, two things I want to share and also respond to some stuff that I saw in the comments, particularly Shauna and Betsy had raised some really provocative questions. Betsy asked a question about sharing this news and also about how to get involved in cogenerational activities. And on sharing this news, we wanted to come to you all first as kind of our closest friends in this space. But we will have very shareable things to share out in the world. I mean, for now, informally, you can talk about this with people who are close to you, but we will have things for public sharing. We'll create toolkits and all that kind of thing. So no need to do that kind of public sharing just yet. In terms of, we are particularly interested in ways that people can get involved. And Encore learned through the Gen to Gen campaign that we are not grassroots people, but that we're connected to a lot of grassroots people. So we will continue to share out ways when entities that we are connected to have ways for people to stand side by side cross-generationally in social action or service work. We will make those opportunities available, and we actually want to hear and partner and amplify when we know those opportunities exist. And I think that third act, senior to senior voting drive, was a really good example of the kind of thing we want to get behind and support. There's a lot of great climate work going on, cross-generational work that we really want to direct people to, and that all of you, I know, will want to direct people to. And then Shauna's question about the older old or advocacy on behalf of olders. I think that's a huge part of, and I'm looking at Janine Vanderberg when I say this, it's a huge part of the ageism conversation and the way that work that supports aging with dignity, aging with equity should all be part of this, and cross-generational efforts around that work are going to completely have a place here. So I would never want this cogenerational angle to ever diminish attention on the needs of older people as opposed to the contributions of older people. So I hope that answers that piece. Steph, you have more, I know, on the branding front, right?
Yes. So we will have a new word mark that says Cogenerate, and we will identify ourselves as Cogenerate with a capital C and a capital G, no hyphen. We are also hoping that people will start using the word cogeneration or cogenerate for their own purposes with no capital letters, which we consider the concept that we hope will spread in the same way that Encore was a word that didn't really mean second half of life until you all started using it in that way. I want to tell you just a little bit about the timing. So we will hopefully in a few weeks announce the co-leadership model that Mark and Eunice are piloting. And then June 21st, we'll release our research and then have a webinar the following day to answer all your questions about it, or maybe a tenth of your questions, because it's about as many as we'll get to. And then in the fall, hopefully mid-September, we will release a new website, and it will be the Cogenerate website. And it will say, you've come to the right place, formerly known as Encore. But over time, I believe that the Encore Network will own the word Encore in an organizational way and will not be kind of getting people get confused about which is which. So I think that's going to be good for the network overall. I did want someone to answer Doug's Dixon's questions. He has many good questions there. So I'll pass it back to Mark and Eunice.
Yeah, I'll try to go back and look.
I can dig in. I can dig in with you.
Why don't you just ask it? Why don't you take yourself off, or Kelly, if you could take Doug off of mute. And but before he goes on, Jim McGinley, I think, also has a question, and I have a question for Mark, and that is, I was really intrigued with that notion that Gen X, or Gen Z rather, they're 2 times more eager to get together with older generations than older generations with younger generations, or something to that effect. Could you expand on that? Because I think that's pretty central to actually rolling up our sleeves and getting to work intergenerationally.
Well, one of the interesting and enormously heartening findings of the survey is when we asked people why they wanted to do this, young people really wanted to learn from older people. And older people really wanted to share what they had learned from the journey. And it sounds almost like a Hallmark card kind of finding, but it does fit with a lot of what we know about human development, and that we've kind of lost sight of in the past 50 years. But there is this deep desire for exchange. And I think that that's kind of at the core of this cogenerational idea. It's less, older people arriving with the wisdom of the ages to bestow that on the next generation, and much more about learning from each other. And it seems like, at least among a segment, a sizable segment of the population, not everybody, not even most people, but a really substantial group of people, there is this desire, not just for connection, that was really important, but for exchange and learning from each other. So it does provide some guidance for the kind of opportunities that we should be creating. There's a project that Chip Conley's been developing around generations over dinner, and this is not public because I don't even know if it'll ultimately be launched, but it's a chance for people over 3, 4, even 5 generations to come together over dinner to talk about issues like climate, race, democracy, homelessness, and other really important issues. So I think it could really help more people act on that impulse to learn from people of different ages.
I also wanted to, I think one of Doug's questions was around issue area, and Marcy put a helpful comment in that said, we won't focus on one issue area. It's unlikely you'll ever see Encore or Cogenerate be just about one. We've talked about that before. Should we just focus on early education and care? Should we just focus on this? I think our strength as an innovator means that we need to learn a little more broadly, but we also know that our ability to shift the field does mean we need to spotlight and highlight and invest in certain areas for impact. And so you will see us right now, we have a big focus on national service, as Mark mentioned, because we think the time is ripe for us to do some major things cogenerationally there. It's just ready for Cogenerate, for what used to be called Senior Corps, AmeriCorps seniors to be collaborating with AmeriCorps, and for us to help influence that system. Climate, and I think we haven't done much in mental health, but because of the survey we've done and we're seeing that young people, that's like #1 in their issue of concern. And while older adults might not have tagged that as an issue area that was their top 3, I suspect that older adults actually do care about that. It might have been the way we phrased it. I'm not sure. I think that a conversation about that, given social isolation, loneliness, and life lived, I think there's just a lot of compassion and collaboration that can happen there. We haven't done the imagination and narrative change part on that yet. So I would love to see Encore do something in that area going forward. I'm not sure what, but once again, we're kind of taking direction from what we're hearing out in the field as being urgent and where we think there's aligned interest across generations.
It's funny, I was just following the the comments, and Aoden just put in about Braver Angels, and we just Eunice and I just met with John Wood from Braver Angels, and we were all sharing about what our organizations were doing, and he said, you know, I just realized that we're a co-generational organization, and he talked about how people of so many different ages are working together, and he said he thought it was really a hallmark of the kind of warmth and love and collaborative spirit that dominates the culture in that organization. So I was thinking, oh, Braver Angels is a great example of this co-generational idea in action. So thanks for that comment. Yeah, and I wanted to respond to some of one of Doug's other comments, you know, which was really about where this all fits into the intergenerational ecosystem. And, you know, earlier when we were talking about the name, I remember when we changed our name to Civic Ventures to Encore, it was really because we wanted to get rid of Civic Ventures. I remember when the organization was starting, sitting down with John Gardner, who had been so great at naming organizations. He founded Common Cause, which was such a great name, but we couldn't come up with anything good. So we decided we'd use Civic Ventures because it was so bad. It was so bland. Then as soon as we found what we really were all about, we would be able to change it to something good. But this is in a lot of ways very different. You know, I feel like we're enraptured with the Encore idea, and we're not, we see this as a complementary kind of name and brand to the Encore idea. And really not everything Encore is co-generational. Obviously there's so much Encore work that's enormously important, but not in the co-generational space, but everything co-generational is Encore, with older people's Encores being the important part of the equation. And it's the same thing with intergeneration. Not everything intergenerational is co-generational, but everything co-generational is intergenerational. So we're sort of a subset of Encore and intergenerational. And, you know, I think part of this shift is out of humility and realizing what as a small organization we can and can't take on. So we think that this co-generational push is an important leverage point that can, you know, contribute to the Encore field, contribute to the intergenerational field, and enable us to have the maximum impact by focusing in that way.
So I'm going to jump in now as your handy dandy facilitator, and we've had a great interaction here, but I'd like to ask Janine to help us wrap up.
You bet, Jim. So thank you all. And this is, Mark, when you said getting together in person, this is clearly, I think, a time when everybody wishes we were in person, because I know everybody here has tons of ideas and you've given us so much to think about. So thank you for this powerful new vision. I personally, I've been struggling for the last month since the Supreme Court decision was leaked. And one of the areas that I really see cogeneration being really powerful in is the number of older women and younger women and women of color who have all come together and saying around women's rights, around democracy. So I think this is just an incredibly powerful vision. I can't wait to be a part of it. I'm noting on the agenda, I'm supposed to tell everybody here about a couple of upcoming programs, so I'm going to do that. In June, we will be having a presentation and a conversation really about the age-friendly movement and with Tim Driver. So I think this is an opportunity for all of us to continue the conversation and the questions that were raised about how does this fit in with the age-friendly movement. And so I think we ought to do that. And how do we make sure that age-friendly spaces really are friendly to people of all ages and not just to those of us who are older. So Eunice, thank you for raising that point. In July, we're going to be talking, I think, to Ken about of Age Wave, about kind of retirement issues and about generosity of older adults. And again, the date on that is somewhat uncertain. I do want to alert everybody here who is part of our community that we are starting an advocacy affinity group. The first meeting of that will be on June 21st. And it's how do we not just learn from each other, but how do we also join forces to advocate the things that are important. And I have just added cogeneration to our advocacy agenda for June 21st. So you already are influencing, and thank you for allowing us to use the word. Marcy knows I've already been using that kind of rather nonstop. I think that is it for my announcement. Again, Mark, Eunice, Marcy, Steph, thank you so much for being here. I know there's so much appreciation. Kelly, if I can ask you to take the spotlight off, what I would love to do is see everybody right now, and if everyone can take their videos off. So let's take spotlight off everybody. Let's just see our whole group in gallery. If you take your videos off, I'm not going to ask you to take audio off, but if we can just, everybody, kind of like a round of virtual applause for Encore and this move to Cogenerate. I think from what I'm seeing in the comments, we're all really excited about it. So thank you all so much. Jim, my instructions say I am now turning this back to Clint. So Clint, you get the final word. And if I could also ask you to mention in your final word, the big idea that you had that the Leadership Council signed off on, that each of us should be, who are members of the Encore Network, who have organizational membership, should be inviting someone of another generation to join us in our programs and representation. So Clint?
Yeah, and I think
Take it.
they're welcome to contact me on that. Thank you, Janine. Just a quick note on our affinity group. It's the Intergenerational Affinity Group, which is part of the Encore Network. And an affinity group is a safe place for a robust conversation where all are welcome. The discussions also promote diversity of perspective. The ultimate purpose is to spark new ideas, create influence, and inspire action. Our group is a self-driven forum of the Encore Network, and we're composed of network members dedicated to linking the generations to create a better future for all. We gather the second Tuesday of every month, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific, to share experiences, learn together, and advocate together. And we take on a small number of projects as they arise. I think that's about it. We have grown. We've actually had a kind of a parallel course with Encore.org Cogenerate. We're just an idea in the summer of 2021. There were no members, and now we're up to 43 members, and really want to grow quite a bit larger so we can offer more programs and support each other. I think that's all we have. Kelly, do we want to say something about the, make sure you fill out the poll. Looks like that is being done. Looks like we met a lot of people's needs. And actually, I'm ending a little bit early. So does anybody, Mark, Eunice, do you want to have any final words here?
Well, Clint, do you want to comment, please, on Janine's invitation to you to talk about the new approach with?
Yeah, just to reinforce what she said, we're an intergenerational affinity group, and our organization skews older. So we're finding creative ways to bring younger people in, and this is one of them. If you're an organization that has an institutional membership, you could have a volunteer working for you, or maybe a young person whom you're serving if you're doing a mentor program or a tutor program. Get in touch with me, and we'll talk this through, because we too want to be far more intergenerational than we are at the moment. Mark or Eunice, do you want to have any
Well,
final
Clint,
words?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. And I not only wish we could be doing this in 3 dimensions, but having more of a conversation about this, because we're really eager to get advice and guidance from the network. But also to say, I do feel, if I had to distill my feelings into one sentiment, it's I really feel like a sizable segment of the younger population is challenging those of us in the second half of life to join them around these social change efforts. And I guess some of me worried that young people didn't want to work with us, that they wanted us to, move aside, and that I'm sure there are some who feel that way, but I would love for us together to answer that challenge, and also in the process be role models for those young people when they get to be our age, which, as we all know, happens a lot faster than anticipated. So anyway, I think it's a great opportunity in front of us.
Yeah, and I just want to echo Mark's thanks for this, specifically this group, for having been such an important part of our work for so long. I really believe that our Cogenerate future will actually make this partnership even more critical and important, because we will need you to be doing the work you're doing, and we can point to what you're doing and then bring the two halves together. So you'll see us very active here with my colleague Michelle Gahey in the Intergenerational Affinity Group. I do really want to plug that. So if you were intrigued by anything, let's make that group not 40 people, but 80 people. So that's my challenge to you. Mark and I are open for more conversations. We wouldn't say this for everybody, but for those of you that are here, I would be open to office hours or one-on-one conversations. We really do care about each one of you, and you mean a lot to us. So thank you for this time.
So thank you so much, Eunice and Mark. And we've had a great relationship with our organizations for quite a while, and we look forward to co-generating with you in the future. Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Everybody.